You know, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pretty sick and tired of legal analysts and former federal prosecutors and political analysts. I'm pretty sick of them. Because what's going on in this country today isn't strictly legal and it isn't strictly political. And most of them, honestly, hate Donald Trump's guts. So what they do is they try and twist their analysis to accommodate their own personal beliefs and conclusions. And I see it on every cable channel. And the news platforms, the news people, well, we know already, they have already surrendered their own careers and professions, such as they were, to being activists and advocates. More and more, the people I turn to, the people I want to listen to, not exclusively, but mostly, are serious philosophers and historians who understand what's happening to this country fundamentally, foundationally. We have reporters today, hosts, news channels, all of them, putting out all the mugshots from the Atlanta case. That's a disgrace. I watch these mugshots. The former President of the United States, America's mayor, John Eastman, Jenna Ellis, Sidney Powell. I watch others, Mark Meadows, and others who've served in significant positions in the Georgia legislature or what have you. Not in their wildest dreams did they think they were committing crimes, because they weren't. A lawyer gives advice to a client and they wind up charged with felonies? Because the state, that is the government, at the federal and state level, don't agree with them? Or refashion or restate the advice that they give as obstructing an election? Seriously? With all due respect to many of my friends on my favorite network and on other networks, most of whom are not my friends, this is way over your head. This is way out of your lane. I think one of the guys that gets it right most of the time is Turley, quite frankly. Dershowitz gets it right almost all the time. But that's not what I'm talking about. Those mugshots, these charges, the charges in New York, the charges in Washington, the other charges in Washington, really to have somebody who's a former federal prosecutor to tell us what's going on, doesn't understand what's going on. What's going on is the same people, the same institutions who've been undermining our elections since at least 2000 are just using different techniques, more effective techniques, more deadly techniques, if you will. There was no reason Donald Trump should be impeached twice. There's no reason he should be impeached once. There was no reason at all why there should be a criminal investigation of Donald Trump on Russia collusion. The people who committed those acts, none of them had to go before a federal grand jury. None of them were charged with crimes about obstruction, interfering with the transfer of power, any of the rest of it. None of them. And yet that was the greatest assault on our electoral system in modern history, if not all history. And the same political party that was behind that is behind what's going on today. Of course they're colluding. Of course they're conspiring. The Manhattan DA, the Atlanta DA, the U.S. Attorney's Office, that is the special counsel in Washington, D.C. They're all colluding. And even if they weren't there, I'll read the press, but I want to ask you a question. How is it possible that not one of them dropped indictments on the same day as the other? How is it possible that they all dropped indictments? New York went first, but the two federal cases and the Atlanta case, all the indictments are dropped within weeks of each other, but all the indictments, including New York, are all dropped within 5 months of each other. And these issues, some are much older than others. How is that possible? And they're dropped in the middle of a primary election. How is that possible? And they'll all want trials, if not yesterday, within the next 7 or 8 months. How is that possible without collusion, without coordination? There is collusion, there is coordination by the Democrat Party, by the same Democrat Party that leaves the border wide open because they want to flip Texas. And it flips so many states in the Southeast and even the South. By the same Democrat Party that a federal judge and circuit judges have now found censored mostly conservatives, campaign issues, COVID issues, anything else that might poorly put the Biden administration and the Democrats in a low light. I mean, seriously, folks. They go after parents. They go after the Catholic Church. They go after pro-lifers. 1,100 people from January 6th. 1,100 have either been charged or did some plea deal. 1,100? Didn't look like there were 1,100 in there to me. I could be wrong. Some went in and some came out. Meanwhile, you have two Ivy League lawyers in New York during the 2020 riots who threw Molotov cocktails and had more into a police cruiser. The same Department of Justice that's seeking 33 years for the head of the Proud Boys. I don't even know the guy's name. 33 years. Who didn't throw a Molotov cocktail at anybody? But he organized it, you see, according to them. The same Department of Justice who wants that guy put away for 33 years went to a federal judge in New York through the U.S. Attorney's Office, I think in Brooklyn, and told the judge that the 2-year sentence that each of them received, even though there was a 10-year sentence possibility for each, was too long. And they were let out. The same Democrat Party and Department of Justice, when the White House was under siege by Black Lives Matter and Antifa, among others. You know, they just paid a settlement to Black Lives Matter, Mr. Producer, where the President of the United States had to be hustled to the bunker under the White House, where scores of Secret Service agents were injured in one form or another. How come that's not Insurrection Day? And what about all the people who encouraged them to do it? What about all the Democrats who encouraged them to do it? How come they're not dragged? Their asses aren't dragged in front of a federal grand jury anywhere. Why is that? Why wasn't that an insurrection? Or sedition? Or a conspiracy to commit sedition? It's not even on the radar. We're living in a soft police state that can get worse. I'm using these phrases so the backbenchers can write them down very slowly, especially on TV and other areas, digital platforms. This is a soft police state becoming a more and more aggressive police state. That's what's happening. Let me ask you a question. I'll prove it. after this upcoming presidential election, how many of you are prepared to be involved in challenging at the local, state, or federal level votes or processes that you think were corrupted by the Democrat Party, by Democrat Party activists, by left-wing groups, by anybody? In other words, how many of you are less likely to open your mouths about it or do anything about it? What are the rules? Do you think these lawyers knew what they were doing would turn out to be some kind of RICO conspiracy? It's shocking. It's disgusting. And you know what's interesting? At the core of all these cases, what's on trial here is really the First Amendment. Whether it's Georgia, you take that Georgia case, 41 counts, 13 against Trump, you strip all of it away, the RICO stuff. There's more than one count in there by itself, standing by itself, attacking freedom of speech. That they didn't like the speech. That the speech was false. That the speech was fraudulent. Same with the counts brought in Washington, D.C. Same with those counts. Since when are non-disclosure agreements criminal? You know, Jack Smith already tried that with John Edwards, and he got blown out by the jury. Didn't stop the guy in Manhattan from doing it against Trump because it's the process that kills. So do we really need former federal prosecutors? Now and then, I get it, to walk us through the technical points. But do we really need them day in and day out to tell us what's going on? No. We need people who have the guts and the smarts, the historic perspective, the understanding of the American founding, to talk to us about what's taking place. That's what we need. More and more of. That's what I try and do here, as well as break down the specifics, but still, we don't need them every day. What are we going to do now? Show after show with the mugshots? First president with a mugshot. Well, of course he is. Look what they're doing. First president ever indicted. First president ever indicted twice. First president ever indicted 3 times. First president ever indicted 4 times. You know what's interesting, America? Even Stalin didn't do that to his opponents. It was 1 and out. But they want to make sure that he goes broke defending himself. That is, no campaign money's left. That he's tied up in every conceivable way. So it's New York, it's Atlanta, it's Washington, D.C. Then they moved part of it to Florida when they got caught in the wrong venue intentionally.